Hi there, James Rowe here, presenter of the Which Cars podcast. Join me and the Which Cars team as we cover the biggest motoring stories, including our exclusive research into car reliability.
When 5 to 9-year-old cars break down, they spend on average 4 days off the road. New to 4-year-old cars spend 4.8 days off the road. Now that might not seem like much in the general scheme of things, but that's a 20% difference. And that could be the difference, for example, if you break down on a Monday afternoon between getting your car back for the weekend or having to wait into the next week to having it repaired.
Should you buy a used car rather than a new one?
Unless you're desperate to get a car in exactly the colour or specification you want, there are plenty of low mileage used cars on the market with significant discounts on their new price. And if they're from a brand, say like Toyota or MG, which offer long warranties, then it can actually be quite a good option buying used because you'll still have that manufacturer cover behind you.
And why are car headlights so bright nowadays?
Car manufacturers want to make life easier for the driver, so they add these LED or laser headlights that illuminate the road ahead like never before, which is great if you're driving a car. Not so great if you're on the receiving end coming the other way.
To listen to the full podcast, head to which.co.uk/cars podcast. You have to be a Which member to listen, but you can get a membership for 50% off the usual price. All the details are on that page, which.co.uk/cars podcast. Hello and welcome to the Which Shorts podcast. I'm James Rowe. This is the podcast that brings you the very best from Which with a weekly taster of what you can expect from the suite of Which magazines. This week we're heading into our archives to bring you an episode from September last year. In the August 2024 edition of the Which Tech magazine, Martin Pratt aimed to find out which operating system is your best choice when you're looking to upgrade your mobile phone. Here's his piece, adapted for the podcast, this week read by Michael Passingham.
I'd like to run some names past you. Have you heard of Sailfish or Graphene OS? Maybe Ubuntu, the Linux-based OS. If you're drawing a blank, it's no surprise. These operating systems are minnows compared to iOS and Android. Even the enormous Microsoft, after spending billions in acquisitions, development and marketing, bowed out of the smartphone market when it realized that Apple and Google's stranglehold was a vice grip that couldn't be loosened. So you've realistically got two choices. Do you choose the slick, finely tuned system centered around rows of apps from tech giant A, or the slick, finely tuned system centered around rows of apps from tech giant B? On the surface, they're similar, but dig deeper and you find differences that could make one or the other the best choice for you. Android is open source, which means the software is more accessible to developers. Android users, therefore, have more options for how their phone looks and operates. Apple allows some customization, but holds the reins tighter. Take the home screen, for example. Both Apple and Android have rows of apps, optional folders, and widgets, but Android widgets can be different sizes, and apps can be arranged however you like. If you want one app in each corner or have them off the home screen entirely, you can. With Apple, you can only change the order and pop things into folders, although this will soon change when the new iOS 18 update is available. On Android, you can even install new loaders that change the layout and appearance of the OS completely. One example is Minimalist Phone, which puts your apps into a monochrome list to reduce screen time, or Niagara, designed to be easier to use one-handed. You don't have this option on iPhone. And while there are benefits to every iOS home screen looking similar, it's hard to shake the feeling that Apple has sold you a home where you can't rearrange the furniture. Let's now look at security and privacy. Google's open door policy allows for downloading apps from the internet, known as APKs, Android application packages, rather than its own Play Store, or from app stores other than Google's. Choice and flexibility are great, but take care, downloading apps this way can open the door to malware. Apple has the App Store, and everything on it is checked to make sure it won't install anything nasty. A recent EU ruling, though, forced Apple to allow alternative app stores. Apple-equivalent APKs are unlikely, and those of us in the UK won't benefit from it anyway. Both operating systems let you see what data apps are collecting so that you can restrict them if needs be. But iPhones go further with app tracking transparency, which shows you when an app is wanting to track you even when you're using other apps, and gives you the option to say no. So, are apps the difference? Well, the popularity of Android and iOS means developers must release their apps on both operating systems if they want to reach the most people. And there's lots of apps, and we mean lots. A newborn downloading a new app every hour until they're 100 years old would only experience a third of what's currently available on iOS and just a sixth of what's on Android. The Google Play Store has more than 3.5 million apps, and the Apple App Store has around half that. But the numbers aren't the whole story. Most developers build their apps for iOS first, so they're tailored to the hardware and get updates sooner. This prioritization is because there are only a handful of iPhones that developers need to build for, where there are hundreds of Android devices with different capabilities, and it's harder to factor them all in when designing or updating an app. As a result, the final experience may not be as optimized on your Android handset as it is on an iPhone, but the massive choice on Google's platform could mean there are more diamonds waiting to be discovered. Let's talk about hardware. Only Apple makes iPhones, but Android can be put on phones from any other brand. Having far more hardware choice gives Android the edge when it comes to specific needs. If you want one with a super long-range optical camera zoom, you have to go Android. Folding phone? Yeah, that's Android. Lightning fast charging? You get the picture. Then there's cost. Even if you choose an older generation iPhone, you're looking at spending at least £500 to buy it new, and not everyone needs high-end specs with the high prices that come with them. If you're spending less and don't want to look at refurbished, where iPhones start from around £350, Android is the best choice. Having your operating system spread far and wide leads to some problems though. Apple controls its hardware and software, so when it releases an update, iPhones get it immediately. When Google updates Android, only its own brand Pixel phones get it as swiftly. If you got a phone from Samsung, Sony, or Xiaomi, or any other Android manufacturer, you need to wait for those brands to test and release the update themselves. Which can be annoying when you can see Pixel owners have been enjoying an update for months. Generally, the more expensive your non-Google Android phone, the quicker you'll get the update. There's also the risk that you won't get an update at all. Apple promises security support for iPhones for at least 5 years. Only Samsung and Google Pixel get more, with 7 years, but that's only on a few handsets. Some brand security support doesn't even last the length of an average contract. So, what do our labs here at Which say? Years of refinement and competition has led to both platforms excelling. They're so intuitive that even toddlers can use them, and it's only once we're set in our ways that things can start to feel tricky. There are differences to navigation and where things are located on each operating system. One isn't harder to use, you just need to get used to it, so don't let any perceived complexity put you off switching. Your decision should boil down to which OS suits you and what you want from your phone. If you want to customize your handset and make it feel unique, or you have specific hardware requirements that Apple can't fulfill, then Android is for you. iOS is the way to go if you want the best app experience and timely software updates, and if you want to make the most of other Apple tech. If you're thinking about switching to an iPhone, here's some things to consider. The latest crop of iPhones are the 15, 15 Plus, 15 Pro, and 15 Pro Max. And as you move up, you'll find bigger, brighter screens, more cameras, and a better processor, but naturally, the price increases too. What about Androids? There are hundreds of handsets ranging from £90 to over £1,500. Samsung is an obvious choice, particularly as it supports its phones for longer than most brands. Choosing Google Pixel means you get software updates quickly, and between 5 and 7 years of support. Brands such as Xiaomi and Honor get you high-end specs for less, but can be supported for as little as 2 years.
Michael Passingham was reading that piece by Martin Pratt, originally published in the August 2024 edition of the Which Tech magazine. To read it in full, then be sure to become a member of Which Tech. I'll pop a link in the show notes for you to find out more. Or if it's a full Which membership you're after, podcast listeners can snap up a full membership for a whopping 50% off the usual price by heading to which.co.uk/podcast offer. We'll be back next week for a brand new episode of Which Shorts. I hope you can join me. Which Shorts was produced and edited by me, James Rowe, while the exec producer was Samra McCarrath.
If you're enjoying this podcast from us here at Which, then why not become a Which member? Right now, we've got a special offer, especially for podcast listeners, meaning you can choose any of our 3 membership tiers for 50% off the usual price. Starting at just £39.50 for a full year, you can get Which magazine delivered direct to your door. For the same price, you could also choose a digital Which subscription, giving you access to all of our product reviews, the Which app, and the digital edition of Which magazine. What's more, you'll also be able to use the Ask Which service for personalised one-to-one buying advice. Or why not get a full access Which subscription for just £49.50 for a full year? Don't forget, that's 50% off the usual price. To join Which or to find out more, just head to which.co.uk/podcast offer That's which.co.uk/podcast offer, or click the link in the description for today's podcast for 50% off a Which annual subscription.